Hello, I'm Cassidy Quistorp. I'm the executive director of Klamath Film, and you just watched Modoc Nation, an untold story of survival. It's a documentary about the history and the future of the Modoc people. With us is director Stephen Higginbotham and producer Evan Gilmore. Thank you so much for being here today and for being a part of the Klamath Independent Film Festival.
It's our privilege.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
Great. So I guess first, I understand that you worked with the Modoc on every step of this process. What was it like taking on a documentary of this caliber, and how did it kind of all start?
It was a little overwhelming at first, honestly, because of the subject matter. They approached us and asked us to help tell their story, and we were happy to do that. Um, it was a learning process, I think, for everyone involved. Not too many of us knew a whole lot about the history of the Modoc War, let alone the Modoc people. And so it was an opportunity for us to brush up on that, but then also build relationships and hear all these firsthand stories of what was the impact of the Modoc War, the generational trauma that has been passed down to generations past, and how are they healing but also thriving now. And um, I think that was, for me at least, a big part of the personal impact. And I'll let Stephen say what his take was.
Yeah, I mean, it was just like you said, they approached us, and so we were really excited for that privilege to be able to tell such an important story of, you know, really part of American history and how important that story was to them. So we really wanted to come into it with, bringing the gravitas of the subject matter to really make sure we told their story from their perspective. And that was a big theme because we really there's plenty of documentaries out there about Native American history, but so many of them aren't really told from their perspective. So we really wanted to make sure we honored that in the best way we could, and just kind of dove in to try to learn the story the best we could. You know, talking with them as much as we could to really make sure that this really represented what they wanted.
Absolutely. And I think that just totally comes across in the film, and you can really feel it, that it comes from them. It feels like it's more, it is more of a storytelling atmosphere than if you were reading it from a history book where you're not even sure who's writing it and where the information's coming. It really was from the heart of the people, and seeing it through the land and through the stories. I mean, it was so well represented throughout the whole film.
Yeah, because it's their story. It was really just our privilege to be able to tell that, and through the medium of film.
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing that struck me throughout is just kind of their connection with the land. And I moved to Klamath Falls 2 years ago, and so I've been to lava beds, and every time I go down there, I just feel like it's this great adventure. And I've walked past places, like Captain Jack's Stronghold, and I guess never really took in the gravity of the history behind it. And so that kind of also plays into you know the history of names, and why places are called the way they are, and that's also a huge conversation right now among tribal people and among where we're at today in history.
Absolutely. Yeah, it was, I think, one of the greatest gifts of working on this film was being able to visit some of the land that was the ancestral territory of the Modoc people, the Klamath people, and just it's palpable when you're there, right? And you've been to Captain Jack's Stronghold, um, to be able to feel the tension of the struggle and the heart of what happened there, as they held out for goodness over a year, less than 100 warriors versus 1,000 U.S. Army troops. I mean, the sense of survival, you can almost taste it. And so it was a privilege to be able to be there, but also be there with them, and to be able to make sure what we were doing was honoring to them, And yeah, it was a really great experience.
Well, like you said, just that connection to the land and, having been out there, it's so beautiful, and you can see why they would really have such a deep connection, why it would be such an important part of their culture. Um, Obviously, besides just the life-giving aspects of, you know, living off the land, but I mean, that's one of the most beautiful, parts of the country I've been in, and to have that, taken away and ripped out would be incredibly traumatic, and I can't even imagine what that would really do to a people.
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned, Evan, the generational trauma that comes with that also. And, it may not have happened to you directly, but you can still feel that pain from your ancestors and from your elders and places that you should have been. And so it's just interesting. I do keep coming back to this idea of the connection with the land because there are so many conservation topics that come up today around Plymouth County and with the water situation. And
Yeah,
it was really interesting. I also thought hearing about like it's one of the first scenes in the film where they're like, imagine this place, and it was much different, much more wild and natural. And so it's not only the destruction of the people and their resiliency as well, but it's also the land that they were torn from too.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah, very much was. Yeah, their home, where they lived for a long time and buried their ancestors. And
yeah. Fascinating. Was there any certain piece of history or story that really connected with either of y'all, or just hit home for you that you really struck out?
Steven, you want to go first?
yeah, I think for me it was really seeing how they've taken, this bad hand that they've been dealt, all this, adversity, being moved to Oklahoma, but then how they've taken that opportunity, and they could have just given up or could have just let that eat them alive, but they didn't. Instead they really worked incredibly hard. Seeing Chief's leadership in the tribe was just something, just how much he's respected and uh, how much he cares for his people, and just being able to go through that adversity, rebuild up, and come out the other side as strong as they are was really inspiring.
Yeah. In terms of the history, I think again, just being able to conceptualize the numbers of it, um, to be reduced down, and to be, um, you know, consolidated down to certain areas or reservations, or and just constantly shrinking, and then them finally saying no, we're going back home. We've had enough of this, and then to return to the lava beds in that area. Um, but then again, their numbers then reduced and reduced down. But then no, they overcame, and they persevered basically until they were just kind of like, well, this is just going to go on forever, I guess. But it was amazing odds that were at play, because you had again less than 100 warriors, 1,000 army troops. Um, they could have kept going, but I think the psychological toll of it is what finally broke them, and caused the altercation that brought the war to an end. And then again, seeing them, the survivors from that who chose to go to Oklahoma, or not all of them chose, obviously. The ones who did go to Oklahoma, those numbers then, because of that journey and how difficult that was, and the conditions and everything, um, and how they were treated by the U.S. government, and uh, then their numbers continue to shrink down until we see today how they turn that around. And I mean, the word resilience, we use that over and over. And that's a word that they've used over and over, is like, that's what it's all about, is just persevering through and then finding the best outcome. So to see them finally coming back to today where their numbers are increasing, and it's great to see that.
Yeah, and refinding their heritage too. That was a really cool thing to see them connect with, is their, because they lost the language from, really being, persecuted out of them through the school system that they were in. So to see them reclaiming that and finding that heritage again is really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's such a hard history and just so much tragedy. And so how important was it to end that film on kind of that hopeful note where we do see people reclaiming the language and reclaiming the culture and the heritage?
Yeah. It was really important, but I can't emphasize enough. It was really important to them too, as we worked with them. They wanted to showcase the achievements they've made as a tribe. Um, some remarkable things in industry and in business and in healthcare and in elder care, and some of the stuff they're doing is phenomenal. So it was important to them and us to be able to show that, but then also tie that back to how does that fit in with their journey as a people. And then, like Stephen said, the cultural piece of it too, um, is kind of this underlying thread through all of it. We repeatedly worked with individuals and got to meet individuals who they knew they were Modoc, they could trace their lineage, um, but they didn't have any connection to the culture, the language, the music, the the stuff that would have been passed down from generation to generation, because they were completely removed at one point, forcibly removed from that generational line. But now they're getting that back, and thanks especially to the Modocs in Oregon with the Klamath tribes that have been so generous and just kind of opening their arms back to their brothers a few time zones away, saying, "Please come back. We want to share." It was um, just inspirational to see that happen as we were making the film. This connection taking place where they were saying, "We want to share this finally with you and bring this back home."
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And, it just that idea of bringing it back home and bringing it back to the land. And it's just, such a, we said it, story of resilience, but also of humanity and, reaching your arm out to your brothers and sisters and really finding that history together and bringing it back. Um, so is there any comes at such an important time, I think, this film, and particularly for our area too, of course, with the history that's connected to. But there does seem to be this huge reckoning with our past and how we've treated tribal nations in the past. And it seems like there's some talk of almost reconciling it, but how do you guys have any thoughts on how we move forward from this, either institutionally or culturally, or what even people can just take away? That's a huge question. So,
Yeah, no, that's bigger than any of us, I think. Um, as for me, from my perspective as a non-indigenous person, um, my hope is that not only are these stories continued to be told, but that we continue to listen to them. Um, as long as the stories are told and we're not, trying to wipe away or whitewash history, um, the stories are preserved, the legacies are preserved, the culture is preserved. Um, hopefully, it'll all shake out at some point. But until then, the best we can do, at least for folks like Steve and myself, filmmakers, um, is try to preserve these things in a historically accurate way, although, there's always some bias, but just to do the best we can, but also to listen.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a problem I can fix, unfortunately, if I knew the solution or but, what I will say is, for people like us is just get to know others' stories. It's easy to view life from your own perspective and through the things that you were taught as a child, but you weren't taught everything, and, you're only taught one perspective, so learning others' perspectives can be very enlightening and just an and I think the more people do that, the more they step out of their own skin to learn another person's culture or heritage or why it's important to them, that humanizes it. And
Absolutely.
it's so easy to just, look at facts or, data or any of those aspects, but to really humanize it, that's where it really hits home for people. And I think that's what's important.
Absolutely, for sure. And for both of you, Evan and Steven, is that part of why maybe you both got into filmmaking, or what kind of brought you into this industry? Was it to share these stories and bring maybe a little bit more empathy into the world, or what was kind of your story into it?
At least for me, that's a big part of it. I think empathy, storytelling, listening, sharing the stories. I don't think I've ever gone into a project with an agenda of my own, at least a blatant one. It's more curiosity, and I think a lot of us filmmakers embrace curiosity and trying to see what hasn't been seen before, tell what hasn't been told before. That's where I'm coming at it from. But Stephen, you.
Yeah, for me, it's just really that ability that I think film has unlike anything else that I've ever experienced to touch on people's emotions, touch on people's heartstrings, and really impact them in a way that, sort of transcends the mind, gets straight to the heart and deeper than the heart, straight down to the soul. And, so many film experiences that I've had, just watching films and being inspired and, walking out of that darkened theater and being like, I'm ready to do something about life. And, I'm inspired, I'm motivated, just like that ability to transcend and tell stories is so powerful. And I just wanted to be able to be a part of that.
Absolutely. That was so well spoken and so well said, both of you. Well, Stephen, Evan, thank you so much for being here today and chatting with us and sharing your film with the Klamath Independent Film Festival. Do you have any last thoughts or anything else you'd like to share?
There is one thing, if I could, probably one of the highlights of working on this film for me is actually the sound and music of it. There is one piece you'll hear towards the end that where there's vocals in traditional Modoc tongue that are sung. And what was so great was a couple of the individuals we worked with along the way shared that with us. That was a recording they had done just of a mother and daughter singing together this song about the bison. Just their voices, no instruments, nothing else. And we were able to work with a really talented film composer, Phil Larson, on this project, who then kind of worked with what they were able to provide. And he turned it into this beautiful piece at the end that you hear as the story is coming to a close. And I was so grateful for them being able to share that with us. It was a very personal and intimate moment between mother and daughter. And that mother and daughter are part of the multiple generations of Modoc women we see in the film. So a big thanks to them. They're, I think, part of what makes the beautiful part of the film so wonderful is thanks to folks like them.
Yeah, I mean, I would just like to thank everybody that helped us out, all of our crew, just all the talented people that we got to work with for, what a privilege it was to be able to tell a story that I know is gonna last with me for a very long time.
Absolutely. Yeah. And thank you both for sharing that story and working on it and also sharing it with all of us today. So thanks.
Of
So
course,
I'll
thank
go
you.
ahead and stop.